Let's talk about foreigners setting up companies in Singapore. So, Singapore, worldwide, we are all commonly known as the money laundering heaven of the world. No lah. Can call us a tax haven, but please don't call us a money laundering haven, okay? Even though a lot of people will disagree, but let's not go that direction. So let's talk about registering a company in Singapore for foreigners, because as we all know, Singapore is a huge attraction for a lot of foreigners simply because of number one thing, 17% corporate tax rate. That, if you compare it to a lot of other developed nations, is considered very low compared to many other jurisdictions. So in this region, Singapore is, I would say, probably the lowest aside from maybe Hong Kong. So that's the way our corporate tax structure is set up, because the government recognized that Singapore is a very small country, and in order for Singapore to survive as a country, if you look into our short history, you will realize and you will understand that we need to do all these kinds of things to help Singapore survive ever since Singapore has been independent in the 60s. So let's not talk about too much history, let's talk about current day sentiments. So how on earth do you as a foreigner set up in Singapore if you are thinking of doing that? So a few things you got to know before you set up a company in Singapore is that Singapore is frankly relatively straightforward as compared to a lot of other countries. I have personally set up companies in other countries as well, and I must say, hands down, our system is one of the most efficient and effective. If all things goes well, you can talk about it over breakfast and the company can be registered by the evening. That is how fast it can get. But let's talk about the practical aspect of it. While it is very straightforward to get a company incorporated in Singapore, there are still certain things that you still need to take note of before you start registering in Singapore. Because what's the worst thing that can happen to a lot of people? If you are like myself, you register a company in a foreign jurisdiction, and then you realize that, the things that you were thinking about when you registered the entity in that foreign country are not exactly what it turned out to be. You will then feel like, what kind of screwed up nonsense is this? This was what I was thinking, but the reality is very far from this kind of things. So it is important to know a lot of nitty-gritty details, especially if you're a foreigner, because when you come into a local jurisdiction, there are a lot of things don't function the same way it does in your home country. For better or for worse, I leave it to the individual. But by and large, you can be pretty much rest assured that in each individual country, there are a lot of nuances in the tax system, in the company registration system that you will want to be aware of before you just plonk head in to register the company. So let's first talk about the who. So effectively in Singapore, anyone can be a shareholder of a company in Singapore. We do not have the kind of restrictions like they do in other jurisdictions whereby locals need to own some shares in every company. In Singapore, if you are a Singapore registered entity, you can be a 100% foreign owned. So shareholders of the company, it can be an individual, it can also be a corporate. It's really dependent on who is the one doing the investment and registering the company in Singapore. So next, moving on, let's talk about what you require when you register a company in Singapore. By and large, again, it's a fairly straightforward process. There are only two main requirements. Number one, you need to have a minimum paid up capital of $1. So everybody has $1 in your pocket right now, which means as long as you have that $1, you can register a company in Singapore. Pretty low, isn't it? The next requirement is really the resident director. You need one local resident director who is a Singapore resident to represent the company as a director. So in terms of the directorship and who runs the company, the only requirement is that the company itself has one local resident director. So if you look at it, the one resident director will be the one who's responsible for all kinds of business that the company needs to be handling in Singapore, especially when it comes to a compliance angle. So you can't register a Singapore entity and then have zero representative here and expect no one to be responsible for all the actions of the company in Singapore. Because imagine this scenario whereby you're a foreigner, you come into Singapore, you register the entity, and then all kinds of things go wrong, and then there's no one locally to be responsible for it. Even if you are the government, it's not something that you would like. Any other directors, as long as they are approved by the board, by the investors, whoever else can be the director doesn't even have to be based in Singapore. Of course, again, there are other intricacies, like if you are thinking of getting a certificate of residence for the company in Singapore, there are a lot of other things that you need to take note of, but let's not address those parts in this video yet. So now let's talk about the how. How long does it take? and how do you actually go about doing it. So first thing you need to know that this process, you need to engage a corporate service provider. Guys like our firm, make sure that the one that you appoint has a registered filing agent license in Singapore. Basically, all it means is that they are regulated and they are registered with authorities to do all this kind of registration for your company. There are, in some cases, individuals who are not registered as corporate service providers. In that case, if you were to go ahead and engage them, you will probably end up with some problems down the road. Let's not go down that route. So the next thing you want to know is how long it takes. In fact, like I said earlier in the video, registering a company is a fairly straightforward process in Singapore, at least from an administrative standpoint. From the time that you have appointed your corporate service provider to do all these things for you, if you have all the documentation ready, things can be completed in a matter of hours. I would say 90% of the cases, you should be able to get incorporation completed within one single working day. Of course, that's not taking into consideration opening a bank account and some other administrative stuff. You can expect to have a formal company registration number in Singapore within one working day. However, the subsequent parts about opening a bank account, getting operationally ready, those are a whole different set of things. It depends on the industry that you're in and what kind of licenses that you need. If you don't require any license, I would say all you need to do is get a working bank account and you're good to go. But if you are in a scenario whereby all you need is a company in Singapore for you to sign some deals and start working on the operations part of it, within one working day, you are good enough to get started with a company registration number. That's all that you will require to get your company off the ground, start running. So pretty straightforward, isn't it? If you look at it, there are only two main things. Number one, a very, very low paid up capital. Number two, you need all the addresses, the nominee director. Again, in Singapore, if you don't have someone who can represent your company, these services are available to be procured from service providers like ourselves. We can provide you with the nominee directors. We can also provide you the virtual addresses that you will require. Again, these services will be fully provided for your company. There will be deposits and whatever not involved. And the honest reality of it is all these things can be done and will be legally formulated for your company. It will all be addressed in agreements, and with all those agreements signed, you basically represent your own company and can run, whether it's your investments or your actual operations of a company from anywhere around the world. Your company will just be domiciled in Singapore. And important thing, get your company start running properly. Go on. Thank you for watching the video. If you found it helpful, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. If there's something that you would like us to cover in the next video, make sure to put it in the comments. And until the next time I see you guys, stay smart, stay curious. See you next time.